Please sit here. They are already coming with the sponsors. You sit there. You sit there.
This is your session.
Yes.
Go in. Just go in. Go in.
No, I don't think it's one of the sponsors. Okay, three.
Okay, good afternoon. Welcome back from lunch, and welcome to the Tropical Issues Workshop. The one quick housekeeping announcement I would like to make for this session is the fact that, as you can hear from the other hall, the YP meeting is also going on concurrently. I would greatly appeal that whilst this session is on, we'll do our best to keep our discussions as low as possible so we don't interrupt the session or cause any kind of distractions. Thank you very much. All right, so just a very straightforward business. We'll take the welcome remarks from our council chair, and we'll listen to 3 of our sponsors who are here of the 8, but we're very grateful. Please, can we give our sponsors a round of applause? Can we give our sponsors a round of applause, please? I'm always very particular in celebrating sponsors because without them, there will be no naives, as a matter of fact. When we bring them up individually, we'll appreciate them some more. We have on our panel this afternoon, we have the Director of the Department of Petroleum Resources, Mr. Mordecai Babaladan, who is represented by a manager at the manager production at the DPR, Mr. Amadasu. We'll get to meet them shortly. We do also have Mr. Kirimade Goke. He's the GM Development Onshore and Shallow Offshore and PE Manager for SPDC. He's represented this afternoon by Alihu Olagunju. Okay. We do also have Engineer Monday Ovude. He's a director for Chevron's NNPC CNL joint venture. He's represented by Kunle Adeyemi. Chidi Amudo, Chief Technical Officer, New Cross Petroleum Limited, is here in person. And of course, Henry Oki, VP Halliburton Energy Services, is represented by Ono Haruna. Again, please turn your phones to vibration or silence. The kind of phone that rings when it's off rang during the opening ceremony. I heard some of them. If they're still here, just remove the battery again, please. See, it's a smaller hall now. It's a smaller hall. Let's just minimize distractions as much as possible. Ifeanyi Wabogu is the Group Managing Director for Schlumberger. He's represented by Ezine Nebocha. She's the Completions Domain Champion, Reservoir and Production. And of course, we have Adeola Bamboye, Director of Laboratory Services, Lighthouse Petroleum. And our moderator is one man we all know very well as they make their way to their seat on the podium. Our moderator needs very little introduction to a distinguished audience like you. He is a former special advisor to the then president on petroleum matters, a renowned, distinguished senior member of SPE, a man who, as a repository of knowledge in the industry, goes around the world making his own contributions by way of training, consultations in the oil and gas industry. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Emmanuel Eboga, OON. Of course, my job is very simple. Let me just quickly run through the men on the podium and then get into the sponsors' remarks. We'll have Mr. Mordecai Babaladan, represented by Aliu, by Mr. Amadasu. Amadasu will welcome you. Good afternoon and thank you for being here. Mr. Goke is represented by Mr. Olagunju. Olagunju will welcome you. Thank you for being here. We also welcome Kunle Adeyemi, representing Engineer Ovude. We welcome Mr. Amudo. Our moderator would get us to meet them a bit more later. Mr. Henry Oki, represented by Haruna we do welcome you as well. Mwabogu, Mr. represented by Ezine Nebocha, will welcome you as well. Welcome Adiola Bamboye, and that will be our panel. But quickly, let me just get into the business of the day. Let's welcome our council chair for a short welcome address. Please welcome Dr. Saka Matemilola.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being part of this event this year. Really appreciate your presence. The theme for this year's conference, Riding a Wave of Boom and Bust, Common Objectives, Diverse Perspectives. And this, if you listen to the minister earlier today, you will hear some of the things, thoughts around some of the things that the government is trying to do to ensure we're able to get a handle on cost. Now, but today we have the topic, commingling, for this topical issue of workshop. And why is it commingling? Why have we chosen commingling? It's a subject that is very, very key and a part of ensuring they're able to get a lot of production with little cost. And bosses in DPR are the very center of this. If you look at the reserves we have, the oil reserves, 38 billion barrels, you find that about 2/3 of those volumes sit in very small reservoirs, what you can call marginal reservoirs. And it's not about marginal field producers alone. It's about all those small reservoirs being held by even the big IOCs. And a lot of them, well, like Chevron, Shell, Total, ExxonMobil, they have all these small reservoirs that are not economic to develop individually. And commingling is one of the issues. Of course, DPR has very good reasons why commingling is not generally permitted. You demonstrate that you can identify which volume is coming from which reservoir and the rest. But then the big producers now said, look, SP, we want you to bring up this issue. We want you to open up the discussion for us so that we can re-engage DPR and see how we can begin to make the requirements for commingling less onerous, and hence the topic that we're having. And again, it's one of the ways where SP is trying to serve all our partners to ensure we create value, we help your businesses, and ensure you stay profitable in your businesses. And today we have those who really are very qualified to address this. We have people from the IOCs, we have people from the independents, we have the service producers who are the core of this, providing all the technologies to ensure that we're able to do commingling properly. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming around. I'd just like to hand over to the MC who will then run us through, and I really believe that we can get some value from this that will help us move forward on this. One more thing. The outcome for this event, SP will follow up. SP will have an advocacy group that will follow up with the different companies, whether it's IPPG, the IOCs, and DPR, to ensure we walk through and ensure the requirements are less onerous. For us, we promise to do that. Thank you very much for coming, and have a nice session.
Thank you very much, Council Chairman. And very quickly now we'll go to the sponsors' remarks. As I said, there are 8 of our sponsors, but 3 are here represented. I'd like to begin with the General Manager for NIPEX. Please welcome Kanayo Ode. Kanayo? Kanayo is there somewhere? Huh? Okay. Okay, we'll switch gears to another of our sponsors. And this time Midwestern Oil and Gas Company Limited. Let's welcome their GM Commercial, Blessing Ayamere. Blessing.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And on behalf of Midwestern Oil and Gas, we want to specially welcome you to this year's event. We are excited to be co-sponsors this year again, as we have done over the past few years. We have continually sponsored this because of our belief. But before I go on, let me tender the unreserved apology of Midwestern Managing Director Charles Odita, who planned to be here, but for circumstances beyond his control, he could not. But is ably represented by teams of engineers, and other members of staff. We want to specially say to the members of SPE and non-members that we are always excited to have an opportunity like this where people come together for interaction, for engagement, for reviewing and, again, checking on better ways we can do things, understanding how we have done what we have done. And especially as a marginal feed company, we are success stories of the people that SPE, by their various engagements, has also supported. We are glad to say we parade a team of highly professional engineers and non-engineers that has helped us. In 1999, Midwestern was incorporated, and in 2003, we were among the 24 companies that were awarded the marginal feed license. By 2005, we started to produce our operation. And we started at a humble production level of 1,000, and we are glad to say that today we currently do above 20,000 barrels. We are also happy to say that we have done and achieved this success because we had the regulators, DPRO to be specific, supporting us at the beginning. We have professionals from other IOCs also that joined the team, and we are glad today that what we have seen today is a success of the campaign that the government started a few years ago. And we are also here to say that we believe that as the government continues to engage in giving licenses and empowering Nigerians to do this work of oil and gas exploration and production, that more attention will be paid to the Nigerians, more support given. Together we know that we can achieve great success. As we have a team of highly tested and proven professionals seated today for this engagement, we are confident that the collaboration and the information that we are going to get in this place today will further strengthen the marginal feed campaign in Nigeria. And we are sure that by so doing, we will again be able to deepen our experience, our knowledge, and the fact that we can do this as Nigerians. The marginal feed campaign has empowered a lot of Nigerians, and we are saying to the government that it is an experiment that has worked, and as we continue to do this, we believe that more success will be achieved. Thank you all, and we say enjoy your stay.
Thank you very much. And quickly, let's switch gears to the Department of Petroleum Resources, another of our sponsors for the session, and welcome Deputy Director and Head of Upstream at the DPR, Mrs. Pat Marcelli. Please let's welcome Mrs. Pat Marcelli, our sponsors.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really particularly very happy about this topic on commingling. But before I say a word, I want to say my director sends his apology. He's attending to other pressing issues, and that's why he's not here. But he's ably represented by a number of us, and I believe that we will do justice to the subject. Just one or two words about commingling. Like you know, we are really the super regulators, and we've had several applications and clamoring from companies asking us to commingle their production, especially apart from the marginal fields that we do accept. But we are not averse to contributions. If we see that, if we deliberate on this topic and we feel that your contributions are valid, we are ready to go back and review our guidelines. But for now, we're still operating within the confines of our guidelines and our procedure guides. But I believe that by the time we deal with this topic today, whatever inputs you have, we'll take it back and we'll go and look at our guidelines and see if we can improve on them in the interest of our nation. Today I have with me Mr. Amadeson, who is a manager of production and surveillance. He's going to do justice to the subject. You see why DPRO, we don't want you to commingle. And we also have with me the other team, Mr. Abba from Abuja. He's now the operations controller. He used to be in charge of resources management. But we've looked at the subject matter, but then we finish, whatever inputs, whatever comes out of this, it will be beneficial to all. Thank you and happy listening.
Thank you very much, ma'am. All right. I've just been informed that someone is representing Dangote, who is also a sponsor. For the next 60 seconds, he will just come and give us some quick facts on Dangote. Let's welcome Felix. Sponsors, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, members of the High Table. Good afternoon and welcome. Senior SP members, greetings to you. My name is Felix. I work for BHGE, but I'm a member of the committee, and we deem it fit to at least, as a minimum, present Dangote quick facts for sponsoring this occasion. And the quick facts for Dangote Refinery are as follows. So you know they're building the largest refinery up in Ibejuleki, and this refinery, it's a refinery, a petrochemical, and a fertilizer complex. It's going to be the biggest, it's largest in Africa. The refinery has a capacity of 650,000 barrels of crude oil per day. The petrochemical plant will produce 750,000 metric tons of polypropylene. The fertilizer plant will have a capacity of 2.8 million metric tons per annum of urea and ammonia for making fertilizer. And then they're going to have a couple of gas pipelines which will bring gas from the fields, neighboring fields, to supply fuel to the central power plant. They're going to have a power island with a couple of turbines which will eventually generate electricity, and the rest that they can use, they will not need to use, they will send to the neighboring community or put on the grid. The refinery project will also create about 2,000 permanent jobs and 100,000 indirect jobs. And this ultimately will save the country, Nigeria, about $7.5 billion through direct substitution. Dangote is our sponsor, and I wanted to be able to give this quick fast so we acknowledge them so they can keep sponsoring. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And so, Dr. Bogasa, I'll pass it over to you now. You can speak from where you are, sir. Thank you.
Of standing ovation just for being able to stand up. But okay, thank you. It's more like it now. Yeah. Just to set some ground rules for this, because this is a very, very important event, and that's why I think we have this large number of people, because the marginal fields we have require the best type of optimization for them to be profitable. That's why SP chose this topic, how to attain optimal production and profitability, and commingling could be a way to achieve this. That's why this topic is chosen. It's very, very, very important. And so we have a lot of presenters and discussants. And because the time we have is not so much, I've decided to assign speaking times, allocate them time. Each presenter will have 15 minutes, 15 minutes, to be able to make their presentation. And I can tell you, if you were in a court and you are making a case, and you couldn't make your case in 15 minutes, you have lost your case. So I think that they have ample time to zero in on the important aspects, because when we chose this topic, we told them to make good preparation. So each speaker, each presenter, and each discussant will get 15 minutes to make their points. At the end, it is fair to give you a chance because they could say something that requires that you question them how they work and whether this is right or not. So we'll have a chance, one question each to each of the presenters and discussants. And I want to let you know that because of the very important nature of this meeting, we have appointed 3 rapporteurs. When I came in here, I called Judge Carlos, said, I want the brightest, the most brilliant engineers we have, who are going to be the recorders, rapporteurs, who will take down the very important information that these presenters will be giving. Because at the end, we are going to issue proper, there's somebody who talked about their own guidelines. What we are going to issue for your operations will supersede everything that you have. So that's why we've chosen those people to be able to record this. And at the end, we're going to read out to you all the important points that have been made by the presenters, and including the questions that you have given. So that is my way of introduction. Some of the people who were to present have not shown up, but others are here. And the fairest way for me to get them going, I say each person that will speak will come to the podium so that they can project their voice very well. And I'll only choose them first from my left, then from my right, and I go that way. You know, I will not use the list that was given to me, but I think this is the fairest way to do it, so that, because it's very, very important to choose a first speaker. And so I'll do it just by going from my left first, then from my right until we converge. And so that starts from now, and you happen to be the one at the extreme left, and you can kick it off. Remember, you got 15 minutes to make your point. Okay, thank you very much.
My moderator, on your kind permission, please, there will be no microphones passed around for the Q&A. The ushers will move around and give you question cards. So as you listen, if you have a question,
Okay, just a little adjustment. The chairman has mandated that I cut it down a little bit to 10 minutes. But I'll have to defy him. I'll make it 12 minutes. Because this is very, very important. Okay.
Good afternoon, all. Dr. Egboga, the Council President, Dr. Saka Matemilola, all protocols observed. My name is Kunle Adeyemo, and I work for Chevron, and I'm here representing Mr. Monday Ovwede, who was actually invited. He's our director for NNPC Chevron joint venture. So today I'm going to be giving a short presentation on smart well completion and sharing, Chevron's perspectives and on lessons learned, the challenges, and how we mitigated challenges and the value that we have realized from smart well deployment in Nigeria. If we go to the first slide there, I think key messages, because I have 10 minutes. We have an outline there talking about the commingling. What does it mean? Smart wells. How do we use intelligent well completions to achieve maximum value from a commingled well? And my key messages are there. Smart well technology has been successfully deployed across several basins in the world, including Nigeria. North Sea, Gulf of Mexico, not only by Chevron, by other companies and partners, some that are in this room as we speak. The technology offers extensive benefits, significant incremental value. It's applicable in large and small fields, and most especially, increasing our production rates and recovery per well. So essentially, you have a lower well count with higher recovery and estimated EUR, which is maximum ultimate recovery. In terms of reservoir management, we've seen a lot of benefit from smart well completions in our application in Chevron, especially for secondary recovery, water flood injection, gas injection, which we are actually implementing in Agbami, where we have cresta gas injection and down deep water injection. Real-time surveillance has also been one of the benefits that we have realized from smart wells. We have downhole sensors with ability to control at zonal level, which helps to maximize production and also recovery. So essentially, those are the key messages that I'll be touching on, but we'll now go into a little bit more detail. What are smart wells? And I have diagrams there to show what we consider smart wells. Typically, we have multi-zone well completions, which are completions in multiple zones or reservoirs, as you might want to call them. We have some continuous downhole monitoring going on and metering. So there's a process by which you can monitor what's actually going on downhole in terms of pressure, temperature, flow rates, and you have an ability to control per zone. So each of those zones that are completed and being produced, you can control and shut them in remotely from surface via hydraulic controls or electrical signals. And this technology is applicable in onshore, offshore. We've had a lot of applications in the deep water, Agbami specifically, where we have used this extensively. So how do you commingle with smart well? And we have more diagrams here just to drive it home. Typically, you see a lot of our shelf development where we have multi-zone completions. We call them dual completions or dual selective, where each completed zone must go through a different pipes or tubings to surface, and they are metered at surface. And that's what we have there. And what that means is that, you have to run smaller tubings, to each zone in order to be able to meter them and bring those production to surface and meter them separately. You look at the DPR regulations, and when we talk about commingling, the middle picture there shows what typically will be referred to as commingling, where you have multiple zones, all producing and coming off through the tubing, but there is no way for you to measure what's coming from each of the zones or control what's coming out from each of the zones or shut them in, and accounting, reserves accounting, production accounting becomes really difficult. In that kind of setting, it's very, very almost impossible to maximize recovery from each of those reservoirs. Now you go to the last picture there. Please go back one. Go back one. The last picture there shows how to commingle in a smart well, where we have applied smart, intelligent well completions, and each of those zones can be metered downhole, and also there is ability to control the interval control valves from surface, so as to either shut one zone in remotely and test each of those zones at when due. So with this kind of technology, you can actually record less capex, very low capex, cost of development is lower. The expenses, you minimize the expense of intervention in terms of zonal shutoffs or even production logging. And production optimization is real time. You are getting real time information. You don't need to mobilize either a barge or an intervention vessel to go and get pressures. You are getting real-time, continuous data, and you are able to apply this, in your service analysis and optimization process to maximize production and delivery from each of the zones. I did mention also, if you go to the next slide, please. Reservoir management is key, especially when you have minimal well count in some of our fields, as we do in Nigeria. The ability to be able to monitor the injected fluids independently into each zone in a commingled well is important. And we have that here, where we have the injection there. We're able to see what pressures we're injecting at, what are the rates, and ensure that we keep within our injection constraints. Also on the producing side, we're able to do that. So this is an example of how we improve our recovery using intelligent well systems in a commingled well. So talking about reducing CapEx, especially in a low price environment. Next slide, please. We have a lot of stacked reservoirs in Nigeria. A lot of those, and several of those reservoirs, some of them are not economic for development by themselves. The smart well technology provides an opportunity for us to improve recovery and develop these reservoirs in an economic manner by applying smart well technology. We are still able to control each zones. We are still able to measure what's coming out of each zone, and we have real-time monitoring to optimize performance of each zone. So this is an example here. It's been applied generally in Nigeria. Shell, Bonga is one, Agbami, Adax also, and also Usan, Exxon, which is operated by Exxon. Those are fields in Nigeria, examples of where this technology have been employed. So what are the challenges? In our own deployment, the major challenge we faced initially was around even getting all the partners aligned on smart well completions. But by extensive engagement with partners, with the regulators, with NAPIMS, we were able to make a headway on that. This is a relatively new frontier. Metering and metering controls are evolving. We have an evolving technology here where installation, infant mortality is one of those things before installation challenges, were one of those challenges that we faced earlier on in the process. Once these technologies are installed, though, they are quite reliable. Flow meter recalibrations are important, especially with gas and water breakthroughs. We have downhole flow meters in there, but once you have changes in some of those fluids, flow rates, you probably will need to recalibrate the flow meters. Interval control valves, occasionally we've experienced leaks where valves leak, but generally we've seen about 90% reliability on some of these valves. Managing plethora of data, I like to key in on that because you get a lot of data from intelligent well controls, intelligent well deployments. We have sensors downhole, and we are recording data almost every 10 seconds. And over a 9-year period, you can imagine how much data that you have. So there needs to be, a series of workflow that will sit on top of this data to process and ensure that the engineers do not spend time analyzing data and trying to process data for optimization, but will actually be able to manage by exception. So that's an important key that I want us to note. We still require to shorten some of the zones, so we do zonal shortens for MER testing or deliverability testing, as you may call it. So what are the best practices that Chevron, that work for Chevron here in our smart well deployment? The operational planning is very important. Operational planning is very critical to success. You need to understand the technology, the downsides, and mitigate those downsides. Installation problems is typically where smart well technology fails the most. after installation, the technology are fairly reliable. So what did we do to ensure that we have successful installation is that we had a practice session on the test well prior to field installation. And this involved not only Chevron staff, but also the service providers, where we all align on our installation process and procedures. The phase development was also important. We didn't do all the deployment at once. We phased the deployment. We had some initial deployment, watch those, learn from those, and then proceeded to the next phase. Unlocking sonar surveillance was also, I think I mentioned that earlier. You need to have a way to manage the plethora of data that's going to be coming out of this. Otherwise, we will underutilize the value, or we underrealize the value from smart well completion. So just give you an example of how we did this. You know, the chart there, if you go back, just one more. You see the chart to the, go. You see the chart there is showing, you know, transient well test analysis there. One of the wells, okay, all right, I think I'm getting running out of time. So it's just one of the wells where we did some acid stimulation there. Without a downhole monitoring, without the benefit of smart well completion, we will not have been able to realize the problem with the zone, do the intervention, which was acid stimulation, and realize better productivity from the well. And I'm going to round up now. So if you just go to my last slide there, go to the next one. So benefits of smart commingling from the way we saw it in Chevron. Field development cost reduction. We were able to see less footprint, wells footprint with increased recovery. Reserves increase for marginal plays. Improved reservoir management from our real-time surveillance and optimization. Lower operating costs. We didn't have to intervene in some of the wells. And we see there, for Agbami specifically, we realized close to $500 million over time within the last 9 years in terms of real-time optimizations. So that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Please, there are some seats this way, just a few people can come this way. Just look for empty seats, eh? If a bag is sitting, lap the bag.
Thank you. Number 2. Thank you so much. Please, 10 minutes.
As our next speaker comes, please, when you ask your question on the papers, indicate your name, your affiliation, and the speaker to whom you're asking the question. The speaker to whom you're asking the question, and pass it to the ushers. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Dr. Ebuga, Council President, sponsors, co-speakers, distinguished participants. My name is Adeola Bangwe. I'm the Director of Laboratory Services, Lighthouse Petroleum Engineering Company. I'm going to speak today on geochemical fingerprinting. Geochemical fingerprinting. And it's a successful method used to identify the origin of spilled oils in Nigeria. Now we are talking today on commingling. But I want to talk prior to commingling. I don't need it. Can they help me? Thank you. I want to speak prior to commingling. DPR has mandated exploration companies to have a database for fingerprints of all their wells. Because when commingling comes up, there are issues where spills arises and there are trading blames. And when we have this fingerprint of all these reservoirs, it is easy to know who to lay the blame on. Can we please go to slide number 6? Number 6. Yes, this one. The principle of the fingerprint is that if two oils have the same fingerprint, they are from the same reservoir, or they're from the same facility, or they are from the same pipeline. In this illustration, we can see the continuous MR1 and MR3 will definitely have the same fingerprint. It will be different from MR2. MR2 will have a different fingerprint from MR1 and MR3. Just like our thumbprint or like our fingerprint, no two reservoirs have the same fingerprint. That is how we track which particular facility, pipeline, or reservoir that crude has come from. That is why it's necessary, it is essential, and it's important to have a fingerprint prior to commingling. Can we go to the next slide? And this is the fingerprint. Every facility, every crude oil, every well or every reservoir has a chemical signature. And this is what it looks like. And we get these things with the gas chromatogram. It's an instrument in our laboratory. And we have different ways, next slide, please. We have different ways of correlating the fingerprints. Can we please go to slide 16? Now, I want to give us two illustrations on the importance of the fingerprint prior to commingling. There was a spill, 16. The next one, please. Next slide. No. Next, yes. There was a spill in Ondo State from a community called Ubale Kekere community. And then we mobilized. And then the samples were sent to our laboratory. Now, where this facility came from, there were three other facilities in that area. And we had to know where that spill came from. We had to know. And we had to use the fingerprinting technology to identify the exact location that the spill came from. So when we did the fingerprint and then when we did the correlation, can we go to the next slide, please? No, the next one's 19. 19. Yes, stop here. From the star plot, these are the figures outside are the peak ratios. From the star plot, of all the facilities, there are three other facilities there. Of all the facilities, we found out that the spill came from A18D. And then there were three other facilities there, but there was this spill, and it was through fingerprinting that we hit the nail on the head. We got the exact facility that spill came from. The same thing happened recently at the Warri refinery, the pipeline and petroleum company in Warri. Seplat pumps crude oil to PPMC. MPDC has a facility in Utorogu area, and both of them were pumping oil to PPMC, and then there was a spill. And they were trading blames. Seplat said it's not us. MPDC said it's not them. And then we were called in. And luckily for us, we have a database of the fingerprints of Seplat crude oil. And we have a database of the fingerprints of MPDC, Utorogu, Abura, and that axis. And through fingerprinting, we got the culprit. Thank you. And then we have case 2. I don't want to mention it. Also, through fingerprint, we found out that 70% of oil spills that are reported are caused by sabotage through fingerprint. Can you go to case 2, please? Yes. A spill was reported in a creek about 40 miles west of an oil offshore facility.
You got 2 minutes.
2.
2.
Okay, I'll do that in 2 minutes. So we thought the spill came from Issa Field. And then we took samples. And because we have done more than 1,000, over 1,000 crude oil samples for fingerprinting in Nigeria, we know Nigerian crude. When we did our fingerprinting analysis through our correlation, can you go to the next slide? The one after this. The one after this. Thank you. Now, in the one I've circled there, all fingerprints, when we do the pristine phytane ratio of Nigerian oils, fall inside that circle. But when we did our correlation for the fingerprint, we found out that the fingerprint was not Nigerian crude. And we went to court. And we found out that the community that was saying compensation must be paid went somewhere, maybe, I don't know where, maybe Ghana and then brought the sample and then poured it and said, this company must pay compensation. They have spilled oil in our community. But through fingerprinting, we were able to find out that that crude did not come from Nigeria. So fingerprinting is a very, very successful tool in hydrocarbon accounting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Number 3. Okay. Thank you.
Hello. Okay. Good afternoon, Dr. Eboga. All protocols observed. On behalf of, can I have my slides on, please? On behalf of Goke Akinrimade, who is unavoidably absent today because he had to travel within a short period. So I'll be making the presentation and I'll take you through the international best practices in deploying commingling technology, the learnings and the challenges. If you go to the next slide, before I start my presentation, kindly read this. I know it's a bit difficult. Then I can start. Okay. So I'll talk about what are the value drivers and the key benefits. If you go to the next slide, please. I'll talk about the value drivers and the key benefits of commingling, the challenges and the technology applications, best practices in commingling and deployment of intelligent wells in share group, and then some suggested way forwards and improvements. So basically, we've been doing a lot of commingling one way or the other. We've been doing a lot of commingling one way or the other. We've been producing production from different facilities, producing them together to the terminal. So that's surface commingling. But today we'll be talking mostly about the downhole commingling. So basically, what are we trying to do? We try to produce oil or gas from different reservoirs together and produce them through the conduit pipe to the surface and produce them either to the production facility or to the terminal. So why do we want to do that? Sometimes it might be because you want to accelerate production. So you have in Nigeria we have a lot of stack reservoirs, and then we want to be able to produce them together. We can increase our ultimate recovery by doing that. We can also reduce surface facility. We all understand what we're going through in the Niger Delta nowadays. For example, the share group, we are quite extensive facilities all over the place. So if you do commingling, you can reduce that. You can also reduce your work cost by doing commingling, and then you have less environmental impact because you have fewer locations. And of course, because you can also regulate your production, you can plan your production in such a way that you'll be able to have plateau production over a long period of time by doing a very good WRFM practices. If you go to the next slide, so what are what are the commingling challenges and the technology applications which we can use to address those? One of them is, which is common between where we always have challenges with the regulators, is trying to do reservoir management and allocation of production from the different reservoirs. We need to convince the regulators that we're actually doing that effectively. We also talk about well integrity, because we are producing wells from different reservoirs, and then we need to be able to isolate them very well. If we don't do that very well, then we might start producing from one reservoir to the other. And in such a case, sometimes if we're not careful, we could also have a blowout to the surface. We talk about flow controls. We talk about compatibility of reservoirs fluid, and then we talk about regulations. So these are the challenges that we'll face. Because the regulation, I was in a workshop last week where one of the workshop participants said DPR is not going to allow us to commingle. And for us, I feel that if you're able to convince DPR that what you are doing is going to improve the value of the business, then they should be able to grant you that opportunity. Technology application to resolve some of these challenges. We talk about the intelligent well completion, which my colleague has already talked about. Flow control devices. The last speaker talked about fingerprinting. We also have sonar testing. We talk about flow metering, pressure measurement, and then the sonar isolations. These are some of the things we can do. I'm not going to say these are things we do routinely in Nigeria. So these are not new things that we can do to be able to address some of the challenges of commingling. If you go to the next slide, what are the international best practices in commingling? I mean, because commingling we've been doing commingling across the whole world. So intelligent completion, accurate production allocation to each of the contributing reservoir, timely intervention. Because when you are producing fluid from different reservoirs, you want to be able to shut off. If you are producing either unwanted fluid, which might be oil, which might be water or gas at different points, you want to be able to quickly switch it off and produce what your target has. Then you talk about the routine calibration of production allocation. For example, using PLT, we can use PLT or we can use geochemical fingerprinting to be able to confirm zonal testing of results. So in the share group and within Nigeria, I just tried to share with you some of the areas where we have been deploying commingling across the world. So in the different continents of the world, we have been deploying commingling also in Nigeria. And then the graph also shows you the cumulative wells where we have been deploying inflow control. And if you look at that table, you will also see that even in Nigeria, we've been doing intelligent well completion in onshore, shallow waters, offshore, and for the share group, we do that in Brunei, in US. And then for the IOCs, you have Woodside, Pemex, Saudi Aramco, Statoil, Eni, Chevron, and Eni also doing that. And for the future, the share group actually have a lot of smart wells which are planned both for our onshore and onshore. And if you look at the other IOCs, they also have the same thing planned. So for me, going forward, I think we need to improve the adoption of commingling and intelligent well technology by the operators, because we as operators, we need to convince the regulators that whatever we're doing, we will be able to allocate and we will be able to have the integrity of the wells, which we're developing. So for me, DPR should actually be asking operators, if we are giving you FDPs, why are you not doing intelligent completion? That should be the question that should be coming from DPR. We also expect policies to address and support the need for commingling as viable means for assessing marginal resources. I mean, we talked about cost. We talked about getting production from the wells are now getting difficult. And of course, improve reliability of the component from the service providers. If we don't get those equipments that we can use so that we reduce our interventions in these wells, then the benefit of the commingling will not be achieved. Okay, I will stop at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, presenter number 4.
Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. My name is Ayodele Ofi, and I'm a production technology advisor for Baker Hughes here in Nigeria. And my presentation is on a perspective of smart completion. I'm going to begin by taking commingling into context of the situation we have in the oil and gas industry at the moment. I'm just waiting for the slides. So, while we're here, the current trend in the industry is the fact that the era of easy oil is going away. We're having to move into newer frontier, deep offshore, harsh remote environments where smart technology is what's going to lead the way. Now, smart technology has been deployed well over 15 years. It was initially focused on deep offshore and on unconventionals, but with innovation and improvement in reliability and cost savings, we've been able to bring that technology into the low end, where it's now applicable in terms of mature oil fields, where we're looking at water shutoffs, we're looking at gas shutoffs, we're looking at improved recovery, and there are several advantages of this, which I hope to talk to. So I'm taking this in the context of operational excellence. When you have a situation where the status quo is being challenged, you need to revisit the system and try to address these recurrent business issues. So downhole commingling is one of the strategic solutions. If we look at all the key indicators for investment decisions, whether it be NPV, whether it be rate of return, whether it be payout time, they are all dependent on your net cash flow. Now, your net cash flow comprises of your revenue and your expenditure. So if we look at revenue, we're looking at oil price, and we're looking at production profile. So we have three factors here. However, of those three factors, there are only two of them that are in our control: the oil production and the expenditure. We have seen an instance where, due to things outside our control, the oil price has gone down. We know that we're very good at our business, but everything else that affects the oil price, we're unable to control. So we can now focus on our expenditure and our production profile. Now, we all speak about cutting costs and reducing expenditure. I speak about creating value, because we need to cut costs, reduce expenditure, while we're still maintaining those production levels, and we're still doing this in a safe way. We all want to come to work, and we all want to go back home safely. We all want to leave a legacy for our future, so we need to ensure that we are operating this field as responsible as possible. I was going to speak on the requirements for downhole commingling, because having worked within an operator here, we understand the concerns that the regulators and even the management might have with regards to downhole commingling. So there are three things that I want to touch on. One is control. Now, you need to have the ability to control flow from each of the reservoirs. You need to be able to control what's coming out from each of the reservoirs. Uncontrolled commingling has been carried out in several places around the world. There are very, very unique situations where uncontrolled commingling is possible. You need to have the depth-corrected static pressures to be similar. You need to have compatibility, similar fluid composition from each GOR, similar productivity indexes from each, and then you might be able to optimize that. However, for you to adequately commingle and optimize production from more than one zone, you need to have flow control. Now, that control requires power supply and requires automation. because in situations where you have wet wellheads in deep offshore, where this is most beneficial, the cost of going in to carry out those interventions is quite high. So you need to have control and power supply. The next thing, which has been touched on, is surveillance. Surveillance is very, very key. It's key to optimizing the production. It's key to well diagnostics. It's key to reservoir management, which I will touch on. And we need to have, now the technology, my co-speakers have spoken about virtual flow meters, pressure, single point and distributed pressure and temperature measurements, which can be implemented in smart completions or downhole commingling to ensure that we are able to identify situations unwanted and we can mitigate against them. Now, the last point I was going to talk about was data management and processing. Now, we've been in a situation where back in the day, to process a certain seismic cube was difficult. There was a limitation. Now we have computers that deal with big data. So, but the problem is understanding the use of the data. It's one thing to have all these streams of data coming in, sampling at 2-3 seconds, every 2-3 seconds, but it's the use of this data. And now, I think the previous speaker mentioned it, that we need to have integrated workflows and software that allow the engineers, allow the scientists to be able to process the data, to understand the conditions. We've mentioned that we've been commingling and allocating production at the surface. It's not any much different. It's just that these equipment are downhole, and we need to adapt the same nodal analysis-based analysis to be able to back allocate production to each of the zones. Next slide would have been on smart completion and overcoming the practical issues. So first of all, the first thing that we need to have is flow control. We understand that to commingle two different zones with two different characteristics, we might have to choke back one or two zones to be able to get the full benefit from a single production to the surface. So the application of smart technology allows us to repeatedly, in most cases it's unlimited, repeatedly control, modify the contributions from each zone so that you get optimal production at the end of the day. The next thing is reservoir management. Now, monitor to be able to shut off each zone, to be able to test, to be able to diagnose where unwanted fluids are coming from, and to be able to analyze that with the aid of pressure and temperature and flow metering, downhole flow metering. We are able to do that without having to run PLTs, which in their own self might not cost that much for the service, but the delay in implementing the measures that need to be put in place could be more costly than the actual service that is being preferred. The next way that smart completions overcome practical commingling issues is well integrity. We've spoken about cross-flow when we have a certain well which is overpressured or its productivity index exceeds the productivity of the other zones. Now we have reliable mechanical isolation systems within the industry. Most of the service providers have that, which can provide that integrity. Apart from the packers that are in between to provide mechanical isolation outside the well bore, we also have flow control valves, which can be adjusted, very variably, not just on and off, but can provide the right choking mechanism. Now,
1 minute.
One more minute. Okay, I'll skip to. So my last slide would have been on value creation for smart wells. It's our belief that with the stacked reservoirs that we have in the Niger Delta, that commingling from these stacked reservoirs, mainly in the Abada formation, is actually ripe to tilt the balance for economics. However, we believe that the innovation that smart technology has brought about and the development, the technology is right to solve the problem that we have right now. If I take us back to the problem, we're having to reduce our costs, we're having to do more challenging things, and we're having to do it smarter. So we believe that smart technology provides a safe, reliable, and responsible opportunity to unlock the industry's potential. Thank you very much.
Number 5 is settled now.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Amandasu Inorense is my name from DPR. Sometimes it's always very difficult when you are made to present toward the last. The second to the last two speakers basically was just saying everything we had, and I told my colleague, I hope this guy did not steal my slide. Anyway, because a lot has been said, I'm going to be skipping a lot of them. I will just, let's go to the background. Some I will be very slow for all of us to understand when it get to the issue of regulation. I'll be very slow so that we get it. Thank you, sir. Okay, we are aware that the current economic reality in the oil industry has caused a drop in the oil price. And so this has brought a change to the way we do business in Nigeria. And that is why SP, I want to thank SP very well. And that is why they decided to put this platform for us to gather together and to discuss so that both the regulator and the industry operators can converge. What DPR always tell operators is that always come, let's discuss. As we continue to discuss, we must always find a way around it. Because of time, I will not spend so much time to put definition in place, but we understand that when you are flowing production through from more than 2 zones in a single conduit is tagged as commingling. But I also want us to understand that we have been doing commingling in both surface and subsurface. A lot of us have been talking about subsurface, but I also want us to understand there are a lot of issues, even on surface. Quickly, I will let us just take us through around this surface. Specifically with DPR concern, we understand that presently we are talking about driving costs down, bringing costs, reducing costs. But I want us to note that one of the things that is almost hitting a lot of the smaller or marginal operator is the issue of a bigger operator handling their crude. But nobody is talking about that. It's part of commingling. Because when you take your crude and give it to another operator to handle for you, it's commingling. But then nobody is talking about the costs. I was just discussing with Chike yesterday that SP need to start thinking about that. Otherwise, a lot of marginal operator, even when you have the reserve, you have all the facility to produce, you might not be able to evacuate the crude oil. So it is something that we need to note. From surface commingling, the issues we have from DPR is well testing and flow assurance. We are also aware that from the subsea, you can flow another well as a carrier well to carry another one. But then we have issue with flow assurance. We are also concerned when you commingle and you don't have accurate methodology to be able to allocate your production to the other party is an issue before the regulator. We are also aware that most of the regulators are not transparent. They don't want to, they don't want the other partner to understand how they do their allocation. This is the operator, this is an issue. Then let's zero to surface commingling. We have all been explaining this, so because of time, I'm not going to dive into this. The value drivers, reduction of well counts through footprints. We have the cost reduction, CAPEX and OPEX, Production is accelerated, and so we have a better wear MPV. It also leads to increase in production when you will now have to produce from all the stack reservoirs and thin oil rims. And as such, you also increase your EURO per wear, maximizing total recovery per wear. And of course, the accompanying HSE benefit, where you don't have to go and get freedom to operate for several wears. And of course, in all this, you see improve overall life cycle economics from your feed. Somebody talked about the international perspective. I'm not going to dwell so much on this, but I just want us to understand that there are also some other kinds of approval they give internationally. DPRO is looking at all this. In some countries, they give area approval, which we call field approval. They evaluate a field and see that there is benefit for them to commingle that field. So production from that field. So what they do is that the regulator in that country or those countries will give an approval for the operator to commingle production from that field. DPR is also looking at that. A field where you have so many stack reservoirs, what they now do, immediately they give them area approval is to go back to the operator for them to notify the regulator when they put such well on production. So now I'm going to slow down at this junction to read what the regulation says so that all of us will understand why DPRO is doing what DPRO is doing. First, we must understand that the Petroleum Act of 1969, legislation for oil and gas matter in Nigeria, provides that the minister may make regulations and orders on relevant matters, including those related to the conservation of oil and gas. And as a result of that, the Petroleum Drilling Regulation 1969 provides for matters relating to conservation of resources, optimal recovery of reservoir fluid from pool and feed, and acceptable practice in accordance with good oil feed practices, etc. The director of DPRO, or the director of petroleum resources, exercises the delegated powers of the minister and issue directives as may be necessary to operationalize applicable regulations in line with Section 43 of Petroleum Drilling and Production Regulation. Now let's see what we have in this Section 43. Section 43 states that the licensee or lessee shall use approved methods and practices acceptable to the director of petroleum resources for the production of crude oil or natural gas from pool or reservoir. And our own manual of procedure guide, section B5, subsection 4, does not encourage commingling. This implies that any method, practice, or technology used to produce oil and gas in Nigeria must be acceptable and approved by the Department of Petroleum Resources, in this case, the director of DPR. So, even with all that, the regulation, we are aware that the regulation does not encourage commingling, but the director of Department of Petroleum Resources has been evaluating every proposal on its own merit based on technical and economic consideration. Chevron has presented that they have approval for this, even though the law does not say so. Shell has also presented, and so many other people. So what it means is that DPRO has taken that step ahead to evaluate all these applications as you submit them on project by project basis. Now, what are those things you submit that we look at for? For those of us that want to bring in application immediately after this conference, you are free to. But then, let's look at some of the things that must accomplish this application. One is it must have an approved field development plan for the field. Somebody also talked about fluids compatibility. We want to be sure that the reservoirs or the zones you are producing the feed to, we don't have sour crude and then mix with sweet crude. And then, of course, this is also another very important one. You are talking about zonal isolation. We want to be sure that the zones that you are producing from have similar pressure regime. Otherwise, one is going to flow to the other one and choke it back, and then what you will now experience, instead of maximizing reserve from every zone, you now reduce production from that. We have also talked about proper accounting. Lighthouse has demonstrated that they have that capability to do figure printing. But we still see a lot of all these IOCs going outside this country to do figure printing. Those are the things, we are looking at. We want to be sure that every hydrocarbon you produce from every reservoir is properly accounted for. And of course, you must demonstrate all that to us and how you allocate your hydrocarbon from the different zones. You must also give us a brief geological discussion around the field or around the structure or around the reservoirs you want to commingle. And of course, gas analysis from each of the proposed commingle zone, your commingling completion philosophy. We want to see the schematic. We want to see how they are going to play out when you eventually complete your wells. And then, of course, the production and reservoir history from the commingle zones, and then with the remaining reserve. We must also understand that anytime you submit your proposal for field development plan, for those of us that have been interacting with DPRO, what we want to see or ensure is that you capture all the reservoirs in your proposed field development plan. That will enable us to know where you have pockets of reservoirs. So even when you come for application to commingle, we already know that those reservoirs cannot stand on their own. And so, they become candidates, for approval. We want to know your reservoir drive mechanism. And when, after doing all this, you submit them for approval, we will check all of them with all the points I have enumerated. And then, of course, approval will be granted. Still, I was trying to clarify when Chevron was presenting about smart well completion, intelligent well completion. I want us to know that they are not completely or directly. It doesn't mean that because you carry out intelligent completion on so much of your well, it doesn't translate to commingling. We need to get that one clear. So we have granted so far about 9 approvals. In the industry, 5 failed at various times. When I say failed, some of them have been converted to single conduit producers. So it means that the initial objective of the commingling has failed. We are also evaluating. The other 4, they are not operating at optimal level. And presently, we are presently evaluating one. I was just whispering to one of them that maybe before the end of next week, DPRO will get back to you.
1 minute.
So look ahead. We want to let every one of us know that there are so many commingling opportunities in Nigeria, as we have presented by several speakers that have spoken. We want to let you know that DPR will continue to evaluate application from every interested operator on a case-by-case basis. DPRO, we have seen that there are emerging technologies such as intelligent well completion. We have also seen advancement in geochemical fingerprint. And all of this, we believe, will we address those concerns of production hydrocarbons from the various zones. And of course, DPR is looking at all that. Now, let's give the key message because of time. DPR, as you are aware, is a dynamic oil and gas regulator, and we are not adverse to emerging technologies and best practices. And that is why we always say, let's discuss. If you have any issue, if you have any reason why you need to commingle, come to DPR to DPR so that we can discuss, evaluate your application, and if it merits it, we give you the approval. I also want us to note that the guidelines and standard operating procedure, particularly with respect to commingling, as we speak, is being developed in line with the current industry trend and international best practices. We didn't have to wait for SP to bring all of us together to discuss commingling. We already see this. We are discussing we had already put a mechanism in place to address this. And we believe that with your support, with everybody collaborating with DPRO, before the end of the year, we will conclude this. What we need from you, and that is why we have that handshake, is for all of us to collaborate. And SP has already set the platform On that note, I want to thank you.
Very good. Thank you. So our number 5.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Is this 6?
Sir, thank you so much.
Number 6.
Thank you. I say you almost took my slide.
Good day, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I have the singular honor to stand before you on behalf of the Vice President, Halliburton Energy Nigeria Limited, who was not fortunate to be here today due to engagements. When SP called on Halliburton to come share their experience as service providers, in particular for smart well deployment, our first focus is, what do you want us to discuss? And they tagged it, come tell us your applications and technologies. And we want to see your success stories. Sitting behind here and listening to DPR, my colleagues talk, I was very happy. And the drive, in conclusion, what the DPR personnel just presented gives us more leverage that we're going to have good handshakes before we leave here. Smart well technology has been in the industry for quite a while now, since 1997. It's on. So smart well technology has been in industry for a while now, since 1997. And typical means for us developing reservoirs is traditionally is either to develop them sequentially from bottom top up, or we go in with multi-strings to develop our sands. The negative impact on this is deferred production. As such, peak production is also negative, in addition to economics. Smart well technology in particular evolve, and the focus here is to see how we can remotely control and monitor our production in the subsurface. A lot of applications for smart well technology occur in the industry today, and in particular, as you can see on my slides, is for us to see how best we can manage production and injections. We have deployed this successfully for producing wells, as well as for injectors. In addition to that, over the years, our technology for flow meters and as such for interval control, as DPR has complained. One focus here is we have issues with production commingling, and why DPR always frown at that is, how can you give me best accounting for my resources? We have issues with cross-flow, and if we have cross-flow, a system or reservoir that's expected to deliver at optimal rates because of water or gas influx into the wellbore, this may impair production from a very prolific reservoir. And as such, DPR will always frown at such. Candidate selections for smart well technology are more of challenging environment, as the geologists will always advise us of complications within the classic environment, where we have geologically complex reservoir with compartments and stacked reservoirs. Most of the IOCs today have subjected their fields and reservoirs as marginals because of complexities and the volume of hydrocarbons there that does not equate to what they tag as reservoirs for development within their fields. In addition to that, for enhanced oil recovery purposes and secondary recovery, our focus is to see how best we can enhance recovery from our reservoirs. For candidate selection, typical what we do in Halliburton is to review in detail, because we believe the subsurface control whatever we can get at the surface. And as such, if you can see from our slides, typical is what kind of well are you looking at first. And we rank this. Is it a producing well or an injector well? How many zones are we looking at commingling based on geologic and reservoir engineering, production engineering analysis? We can rank this, and as such, based on typical case histories that have been published globally, 2-3 reservoirs commingled together has been what has been in the play. Now, functionalities that is key to us and we always flag to operators is, do you want to control or you just want to monitor this? And as such, as you can see, as highlighted here, we have various ways we can attack this. And as such, for producing well, we have scenarios that can go as much as 8 different steps, which encompasses how best we can combine monitoring and control of our subsurface reservoirs. A lot of case studies have been published and references also attached globally. One key concern I had when I was pulling through our archives to see where these case histories are, I jumped into the first, and as the DPR just clearly stated, the first thing I saw was a turn back. Because in 2000, thereabout, when the first smartware was deployed to Nigeria, it was a failure. The hydraulic system at the surface failed, and as such, that well was converted to a single producer, which was not what the intent was. I got worried because I saw a lot of case histories globally. And to move that forward, I had to check more in-depth, and I found that, yes, we have some success stories in Nigeria. And as you can see, our fingerprint here in Africa, a lot of completions have been done globally. We have gone as far as commingling 6 different zones and producing it, and we have success recorded. I will share with you in a moment. In addition to that, you can see over the years, a lot has been done, over 2,000 zones controlled, with production well as much as over 700, and system controls 800. Various companies, about 49 companies here, and 33 countries in the world have had success stories executing the smart well technology. And my concern is, where is my country? SP in 2015, the Shell Group published a consent for us, and we should control the economics for smart well deployment. In 2002 to 2009, they did a research, and this publication was able to capture their concern. And in particular, they published as much as $5 billion quantifiable benefits from smart well deployment. And what this entails simply is production increase and ultimate recovery increase, as well as reduction in technical costs, which is our CAPEX and OPEX. And as I showed earlier in the first slide, all what this entails is deploying what 6 wells would do to produce 6 zones sequentially bottom up or using multi-strings. I can do that with just 1 well. But where are the success stories? And as such, permit me to share with you 2 case histories here. The first case history here has been executed in the Niger Delta. And in this case, we have a 3-zone intelligent well completed in the Western Swamp Niger Delta. This is the first intelligent well deployed onshore Niger Delta. And as such, the concern was, would the regulators agree with us? What are their concerns and how can we manage their concern? One of the key success stories here was we had to work closely with the regulators, with NAPIMS also, and also with the joint venture partners. To drive this home, as the DPR clearly stated, we had to do sufficient testing, both geochemical fingerprinting for the 3 different zones, and also we did downhole testing to understand what could be the potential deliverability from these wells. As you can see highlighted here, although not too clear, these 3 zones present different producibilities. We had the different, the thickness between these different intervals was over 200 feet. But we had to commingle these 3 sands, and based on what we had compared to the actual, as you can see in this table, the discrepancy were not far. The key that drove this to success in particular was the failure mode effect criticality test that was done in our Houston base. And we ensured that we had both DPR representatives there, NAPIMS was there, the IOCs were there, and all joint ventures that were part of the theme. And we recorded success stories, and of key interest, a well that was planned to be completed in 24 days, we saved 10 days, doing it in less than 14 days. And that simply includes our AFE being cut down as much as possible to 20%. I made effort to reach the operator before coming here, but we could not reach them. And the focus is to want to see what the wells are currently doing. Because based on tests, as you can see from the test table here and fingerprinting results, the wells demonstrate practicality in the deployment. One more before I conclude. In the Gulf of Mexico, we have also executed this over the years, and this is a key success to Halliburton. Why? The reason is because this is a complex, high pressure, high temperature system, deep water with water depth over 2,000 feet, and with pressures, reservoir pressures over 15,000 psi. We successfully deployed this technology to develop 2 different sands, and 2 wells were drilled to assess the C and the D sands, as you can see them stacked here. And as DPR will always insist, detailed reservoir characterization studies, as you can see from the images here, was done to understand the potentialities and the reservoir quality in the subsurface and what could be the impact. We deployed, typical for us, our interval control valves, expanded screens, as well as gas lift was installed in these wells. And we recorded success stories. A lot of case histories I would like to share, but time will not permit us. This is also for 3 zones. And finally, this is for an injector well. We have also deployed this in ensuring that accountability, estimation, and accounting for whatever was injected into the reservoir was properly assessed to those zones of interest. And in conclusion, it's of key interest to note, as my colleague stated clearly earlier, that uncontrolled commingling have been executed elsewhere in the world. Of key interest, why would that work? Concerns you must have similar fluid compositions, and it's typical of depleted systems where we have depth pressures calibrated as almost same. In the absence of situations like this where we have a complex system, there's a need for us to have both control and monitoring systems in place for intelligent well deployment. It's key for me to conclude that looking through publications in Intelligent Wells in 2015, the MD of Chevron clearly stated in the conference in Aberdeen that intelligent well completions has brought a well to the industry today. And what was the focus? The focus is here. The technology that enabled deep water development and has converted what we thought was impossible to become possible, and also the possibility to become more cheaper. We'll be happy to shake hands with the IOCs and the marginal operators to come see you DPR as soon as possible, because we are convinced beyond every doubt that Nigeria also can join globally the world to execute these and optimize production from our mature assets. Thank you.
Okay, so number 7. Okay. I was worried that maybe very brilliant.
Hi, good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, my fellow speakers. My name is Ezine Nebocha. I'm honored to speak here on behalf of the MD of Schlumberger, Ifeanyi Wabogo, who cannot be here at the moment. My background is in reservoir engineering and production engineering, and I'm the completions domain champion. I mean, having to go after everybody, the topic of commingling has been mostly exhausted, right? And the funny thing is, when you go outside Nigeria and you speak about smart well technology, it's being looked at as a production optimization tool. It's not looked at as a commingling tool as we do in Nigeria. And that's what I want to talk about. I want us to shift our mindset from the fact that you're using smart well technology because of a DPR requirement, but rather because you want to get the most value from your asset. Now, let's look at a situation where you have a multi-stacked reservoir, as my colleague showed. You have 4 zones, you have 5 zones, you have 6 zones. If you look at most of the completions in Nigeria, 60% of them are completed as dual string. And what can a dual string allow you to do? A dual string will allow you to produce from 2 zones. And then you have another 30% that will put a sliding sleeve behind 2 other zones, giving them a way that they can produce sequentially, meaning you perforate and produce 2 zones. When the short string waters out, you go do an intervention, you squeeze cement, you open the sliding sleeve and perforate. However, if you look at the economics, you find that is not economical. That doesn't give you the most production, and that doesn't help your economics. If you could produce from this at least 4 zones or 3 zones at the same time, it improves your production, it improves your recovery, and it helps the pocket. It helps you get your oil much quicker, right? And that's where we need to start looking at smart well technology about. Now, the last speaker, he talked about smart well technology being used to measure and control. So what does that mean? Measuring means surveillance. You want to be able to quantify. We've talked of geochemical fingerprinting, which would allow you to actually measure or allocate how much you're getting from each zone based on the geochemical fingerprint of the oil from each of these reservoirs. However, the other part is the control. How do you prevent cross-flow, right? And that's where the flow control valves comes in place, where he talked about. So essentially, DPR has said that if you want to commingle, you must be able to allocate how much production is coming from each of those zones, okay? And my question and my challenge to DPR today is, how are they ensuring that this production is accurately allocated? Are we just saying, let's put a smart well completion down in the hole? Perfect, I work for Schlumberger. We love to sell smart well technology. But as a Nigerian citizen, the question is, how is that smart well technology being used to ensure that production is accurately allocated to each zone? And that is the question and my feedback to DPR. How is it being measured? What is being done after the completion is done in hole? Now, let me tell you, for a smart well technology, you have a flow control valve, you have pressure, you have temperature measurement. Flow control valve does not measure downhole rate. All it is a choke. What does that choke do? That choke helps you when you go back to do nodal analysis to estimate or quantify how much each zone is producing. So that means that if I don't do my nodal analysis accurately, first of all, allocation is wrong. It's just an estimate. And this is the hard truth. That's number one. Secondly, you do no nodal analysis, right? What of when you have water breakthrough? Flow control valve does not measure the water production downhole. How are you allocating which zone is producing water and oil? This is a question that the PR needs to look into after the smart well completion is put in hole. Let's not think that after we install smart wells, that's the end of it, because there's a lot of engineering that goes beyond the installation, right? So technology has also evolved, right? If we're doing what we're doing and we keep an eye on it, we should be able to allocate production. But we should actually also test the wells regularly to compare what is being allocated with what is actually being produced. And that's the way that you can close the loop. Secondly, if you cannot do that, what technology can you use? Technology has evolved today whereby you can actually do downhole rate measurement. You can measure water cuts downhole. You can measure your production downhole. It's available. Of course, it's never been deployed in Nigeria because in the technology adaptation, we're not up there, we're down here, unfortunately, right? But in the years to come, this is something that is going to pick up in Nigeria as well. And while DPR is reviewing its guidelines and its principles, I believe that some of these feedback are things that need to be looked into for our own benefit as Nigerians to make sure that things are being done accurately the way they're meant to be done. And then the next thing I wanted to talk about, the downhole fluid sensors. How do we make sure that what we're measuring is the same thing as what is being produced as surface. So now we have a smart well completion. You have 3 zones, you have 4 zones, all producing. Now what you're getting is pressure and temperature downhole, right? So that needs to be converted to a flow rate. That needs to be tied to also what is happening at surface. Of course, in some parts of the world, it's not even mandatory to do intelligent completion. Some regulations mandate you to do a production log every X, Y, Z amount of time and use that production log for your allocation. However, production logs will not let you control production. And in between the period where you do your production logs, you don't know what's going on. By the time you go to run your production log 1 year later, you find out that you're already having cross flow. When did it start? You don't know. How much production have you lost to the thief zone? You don't know. So some of these challenges are the things that I believe that we need to look into. Smart well technology is a production optimization tool. It's not a commingling tool. It's going to help you as a marginal field operator or as an operator to increase your production from your asset. It's been proven everywhere in the world. What are the risks? It does not come without a risk, and that is the fact. Right? High reward, high risk. First of all, your completions is going to be more complicated. You have flow control valve, you have electrical cables. Running the completion is challenging. However, if you work with a service company and you do engineering, you can minimize some of this risk. Secondly, if you're planning to commingle your well, you have to start thinking about it even before. It's not a reactive approach. Because even in the selection of your wellhead, and you know that your wellhead you purchased maybe 2 years ahead of time, if you don't have provision for intelligent completion, then you can't run it, right? So these are the things these are the engineering that is required at the early stages, even before you start planning your well, to make sure that you have a successful smart well completion deployment. Thank you very much.
One more. Very good, very good.
Hello, can you hear me? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much, fellow speakers. I think it's difficult to go after Izine. She's spoken like a true reservoir engineer who is always concerned about production allocation. Because it's one thing to do intelligent well completion, it's another thing to properly allocate the production to the different reservoir flow units. And if you're unable to do that, then obviously your work as reservoir engineer becomes even much more difficult. So there are shortcuts. People use things like split factors and so on and so forth. But as a production optimization tool, if you're unable to tell what is coming from where, then it becomes a major problem. Now, my topic today is about CHA challenges. However, I couldn't help but contribute to what she has said because my background is in reservoir engineering. And I spent most of my career with most of the majors, and listening to all of the speakers, there are a couple of things that we need to touch about. CHA in this particular instance refers essentially to the problems or the issues that we are facing when we commingle in the surface. The reality is that if you have all these challenges, which DPR is very much aware of, then clearly it makes them feel gives them a bit of pause. If what is on the surface that you can see, you're having so many problems, what is under the surface that we cannot see? And I think that is where the balance we have to strike the balance. We as producers want to maximize profitability, but I can understand the role of the regulator is to preserve results for the benefit of the entire country. So that balance has to be achieved, and I think we're all here to make sure that we move forward in the right direction. Now, I recently joined New Cross as their Group Chief Technical Officer, and in my role, CHA is not one of the things that ordinarily I should be concerned with, but I realize that because of CHA, we are actually having a lot of problems, and I'll bring that upon to bear. The next slide, please. So effectively, this is all about money. It's about profitability. We are in business to make money, and what we are seeing is that if you remove some of the uncontrollable factors like royalties, and also remove the financial cost because it varies from company to company, the biggest single problem in terms of unit cost per barrel is CHA. And it contributes about 40% of our cost per barrel. This is huge. And most operators, especially the independents like us, who depend on the major IOCs, are almost at their mercy, because without them, we simply cannot sell our crude. And if you go to the next slide, one of the things you notice here, I did a quick analysis of our CHA, and this is where we have to ask ourselves, what is going on here? There are a lot of things that contribute to the CHA, but one of the problems we have is the losses. It's good to say we measure. So when I look at my well tests, I do all the wells, I'm able to allocate my production, and I say at the point of injection into the trunk line, this is how much I'm producing. But when the production is back allocated to me, it's a lot less. And in the last 1 year alone, the losses have more than doubled. So in 2015, about 12% of our production was lost, and 2016, that increased from 12% to 24%. So the question is this: if we were to lose 24% of our production for losses that we do not know what caused the losses, and we just have to bite the bullet and accept it, as small operators, as a CTO trying to increase the production of my company, if I were to triple the production of my company and I'm losing a quarter of it to losses, just because somebody who is supposed to handle my crude probably is not doing as good a job as I was expecting to do, and is not accountable to me, then he's holding me hostage. And this, for me, is a big problem. The next slide. But this problem is not as simple as it appears. I can understand the issue as somebody who has worked in IOCs most of my career. What you have here is the legacy issue. When these fields were first acquired by the IOCs, they owned virtually everything. And therefore, the issue of back allocation and things like that were not such a big problem for them. So if there were losses at all, they bore all the losses. But what has happened is that you now have multiple injectors into some of these export lines, and the export lines are owned by a pipeline operator, and the terminal is owned by someone else. But at the end of the day, what happens is that for those of us who have to inject or rely on these export lines, we are being told that we are losing so much of our crude. The question is, what are both the pipeline operators and the terminal operators doing to ensure that these losses are minimized? You will agree with me that in a normal life, if you are doing business with someone and he asks you to take care of your money, and every year you are losing a quarter of it, definitely you probably want to look elsewhere. But in this particular situation, it's almost like a monopoly. We are stranded. Without them, we can't produce. So whatever they tell us to do, we are stuck with them. So DPL has a big responsibility here, not just because we have opened the market for independents to perform in the industry, but also a moral responsibility and obligation to ensure that those who have to sell this crude play a more active role in ensuring that the losses are minimized. Now, from what you can see there, you can see that after I put in kind of dummy injectors, which are representing different companies, injecting into the same trunk line and also the oil terminal before you do the export. At every point in time, when you measure your crude and you see this is what I've sold, we believe that what we think we have sold is what we should get the money back for. And there are problems. When these things were first constructed, LACT units were not required because these are all owned by the same person. So there are issues of measurement at each of these terminal points, or these injection points. There are issues of measurement at the point of entry, and a whole bunch of things. So how do you back allocate all of these losses? The method of allocating losses is not always very clear to us, and sometimes you may bear a disproportionate amount of the losses than you ideally you should bear. The next slide. So, in my own opinion, I think that the CHA charges appear insensitive to commodity price. Most times when we have, when the commodity price rises, we understand, things should increase. But when it collapses like it has collapsed in this particular instance, the CHA charge appears to be insensitive. So rather than actually reducing CHA prices, in fact, some of the majors are asking us that they want to increase it. So this is quite difficult. So it's like you've told the Nigerians to come and partake in the production of the reserves, but at the same time, you make it impossible for them to survive. So as regulators, we are hoping that we can all come together to find a solution that is equitable, because as it stands, it's a struggle. So my question is this: are pipeline and terminal operators doing enough to reduce losses? I'm new on the job, so forgive me if I feel that they are not doing enough. If I've lost double the amount of crude in 1 year, then, and they are not actually feeling any consequence for it, what more can be done? Because this is obviously unacceptable. Now, the alternative is that should everybody go it alone? This is the whole essence of this smart technology. The whole idea is that we don't want each reservoir unit to produce on its own. That is why we are commingling. So there is benefit in commingling because it reduces the footprint on the environment. It makes it a lot easier because some of the injectors don't have enough capacity to have their own export line and sales points. So by coming together, there is benefit in doing so. But this must come at a point where we all feel we are all equally sharing the losses or minimizing the losses jointly, and we feel like equal players in this whole exercise. So, so for me, therefore, I will run it up there that if we as a group do not know what is coming from where at the surface, then it's extremely difficult for us to now tell DPL to accept that what is coming from the subsurface is actually correctly allocated. So I think this challenge needs to be addressed. Thank you very much.
Well, in my opinion, I think the last statement he made summarizes the whole problem that we have here. And also, it shows the gulf between the operator and the regulator. So we are going to have to come together to resolve that difference, because I think the operator is at the forefront of the technology and the business, and the regulator will need to catch up to be able to regulate. And we did say that there will be questions for each of the speakers, but we have cut into our time so much that I will now reduce the questions to 5. There will be 5 questions, and I'll have Mr. Suji to project the questions. There will be 5 of them, and they will be directed to speakers. Question number 1.
Thank you, sir. The first question goes to the representative of Shell, and it's from Tony Ezuku of Proxima Energy Limited. He says, how much technical works has your organization done to quantify the errors associated with measurement of production rates and how these affect the accuracy of allocation to each well zones and reservoirs, and ultimately revenue from sales, especially when more than one party is involved? So I'll give that to you. If you can just hold on to it, I'll read the other ones and then I would continue. To the first presenter, that will be Chevron. Yes. Okay, correct. It says, this is from Goodluck Mfonum, Senior Drilling Cementing Engineer, Seplat Petroleum. He says, in the commingling of oil and gas from either a stacked reservoir or a single reservoir with multiple pay intervals, how can you balance flow contribution from each reservoir in order to avoid cross flow from one reservoir into another? This next question is to Lighthouse Petroleum and is from Richard of SPDC. What kind of biases which may have potential to invalidate fingerprinting outcome do you have to deal with in the geochemical fingerprinting method? This is to Lighthouse. Lighthouse at the extreme. for our smart and beautiful drilling engineer, right? It's from a reservoir engineer, I beg your pardon. This person didn't give me his or her name, but it's the question that came for you. So it says, a downhole oil, WC pressure, then temperature measurements, etc., data historian, IT infrastructure to ensure continuous storage of data without... See if you can make... No, I have read it. Okay, take. I have read it, but see if you can make sense of it. Give it to her, give it to her, give it to her. Give it to her. The person just... It happens sometimes. See, if not, one last question. Do you have a last one? That's it, we'll have 4. Okay, he has one. You have one? One question with you? The 5th one? Can I read the 5th one? My chairman says 5. This person is on... This question is for Halliburton and it's not telling us his name. How do you manage or optimize production from reservoirs with different pressure regimes in a commingled system, taking note of the fact that the deeper reservoirs with the higher pressure regime might choke back or cause back pressure to a shallow reservoir in a lower pressure regime? Halliburton that way. So, sir, those are the questions. I think we'll begin with the very first gentleman here. You have a mic? Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. We all agree that the issue of production allocation is a very complex one. So if we get into this, it's not something you can answer in 1 minute. However, what Shell does is we have our facilities, we test our wells every month. That's what we aspire to do, and that's what we do most of the time. And now we aggregate the production, and then we take it through the trunk line to the terminals. We all understand the challenges we are facing. I'm not the technical authority on this question. We can have further discussion on this. However, we submit our test program and our test result to DPR, and we've had issues where if we're not complying, we do have some very frank discussions with DPR. So we test our wells, we check what we receive at the facilities, and then we test what we receive at the terminal, and then we try to do production reconciliation. Of course, there has been a lot of discussion on production allocation, and it's not something you can answer in 1 minute. It's a very complex thing.
Chevron.
Okay, the question here is around how do we balance flow contribution from each of the reservoirs that we commingle in order to avoid cross flow from one reservoir into the other. If you recall, I showed a diagram indicating that when we have commingled smart completions, we typically will have interval control valves. But apart from that also, you have sensors, pressure sensors for each of the zones, upstream of the interval control valves. So if you have a 2-zone smart completion, for instance, you have pressure sensor upstream of each of the zones. And then you have also, for the common stream, you have a pressure sensor. So you are able to determine, what your drawdown across each of those intervals are. And as long as you manage that very well, you can prevent cross flow. Using the ICVs also, if you get into a situation where perhaps one particular zone is not getting adequate pressure support and is getting depleted, you are in a position to be able to choke back that zone, or ultimately, shut it in until you are able to restore the pressure. So this is something that we built into our automated workflows. Actually, the engineer doesn't really need to, spend his time monitoring all this. All these are built into automated workflows. The pressures are captured in a historian, and you have what we call the I field. We take these pressures, which are being recorded almost at a 10-second interval in an automated workflow. And if it senses a potential for cross-flow condition, the engineer is flagged. So the engineer actually manages by exception. So this is actually a good process that we have in place, and we're able to realize a lot of value from our smart well deployments to date. Thank you.
This question is It's rather confusing, but I think what the person is trying to ask is how can we ensure continuous storage of data without breaks when we look at downhole oil, water cut, pressure, temperature, etc. So all we've talked about regarding the smart well completion is what we see downhole. So at surface, you need something called like an acquisition unit. So this acquisition unit is what is going to convert the measurements downhole into sensible data. Secondly, the acquisition unit will need you need some source of power. You need the solar panel, you need generator, you need battery. You need something to power the acquisition unit. Now, once you have that, it's taking data in real time continuously. Now, to transmit it to your office to ensure that you have continuous data in your office and you can act in real time, you need to have data connection. You need to have a way to transmit that data from your well site to the office. And then in the office with your computer, you can log on either to the server or to different softwares used for real-time data connection, and then you can access this data. So I think that's what you need to close the loop. You need to have the infrastructure, the acquisition unit, power, and data connection at surface. Thank you very much.
Just to add to what she said, usually we deploy a thermoelectric generator, which has a backup plan for up to 21 days in case there's any shorten time. And that was exactly what was deployed for the case in the shallow western Niger Delta, where that three zones were commingled. For this question, how do you manage or optimize production from reservoirs with different pressure regimes in commingled system? The three case histories I showed earlier for 2 zones, 3 zones, and deep water had similar trends like this. And basically, for systems like that, using the three reservoirs commingled as an example, we deployed a 3 dual sensor ROC PDG for that system, and the AC ICV, and also a flow meter was deployed for that installation. And as such, if I had, for one of the reservoir, the deepest reservoir next to the zone B was over 200 feet, and they had different pressures. So a key thing we did was to ensure first that we had zonal isolation, because this is one way to manage that. We tested all the packers that was deployed, the hydraulic packers, as well as the swellable packers that were deployed for that completions. And also the ICVs were used to choke in the production from this field to ensure that the high pressure, deeper reservoirs will not choke the middle or the shallower sand. We had better pay in zone A with zone B diminishing because in that case history, the productivity index in the first sand was about 3.9. And that reduces as you go deeper because the pay and quality there are poorer. And as such, we had to use ICV to ensure that the poorer sand beneath with high pressures will not impact what we had at the shallow interval. And as such, the ICVs came handy to us. Now, the flow meter challenge we had was it's difficult to really differentiate our water from oil, so we only looked at liquid rate and gas rate. And comparing these to what we got from the fingerprinting as well as from testing, we're able to establish that potentially, yes, we may not have 100% correlation, as I showed in the graph earlier, but the plan compared to the actual was close to 90%. So to answer your questions, we can use the interval control valves and the PDG back calculate to see how best we can control production and ensure that the deeper sand will not impair production from the shallow sand. Thank you.
Yeah, this question is from Richard. And from the manner of the question, I guess you're a geochemist. When we do the fingerprinting correlation, we first look at for the pristine phytane ratio, that's C17, C18, and it must fall within a range. If it doesn't fall within that range, it's either the crude is not from Nigeria or it's a defaulty analysis. Also, we look at the terrain index, that's the C27, C28, C29, for crudes that maybe they have degraded, and then we don't get the C17, and then we look higher. And then we can also look at the Opane index, and then we have a range for all these. If they don't correlate within that which we have for Nigeria, then it's wrong analysis. Even if the crude has been exposed to the environment for upwards of 3 years, we can still use biomarkers to get the fingerprint, to do the correlation. So what I'm saying is that we have a range during which the C17 to C32 must fall into. If it does not, either it's not from Nigeria or it's a defaultive analysis. Do I answer your question, sir? Thank you.
Well, I think from the questions, the participations are very serious. I like that. And as a result of that, I want to squeeze in one more question. I got about 2 or 3 minutes left. So, Mr. Suji, can you, we want to squeeze in one more question.
Yes.
And my suggestion would be this, that all these questions that have been given, I would plead with you to go home and write the answers and document them, because they are very technical questions, and these are the issues or the problem in commingling. So I want you to write the answers and document them technically, and send these to Caroline Onita, who is the chairman of this session. And that is the same thing that our reporters will do as well. I just want you to know, additional work, but it's worth it. Yes, because that will be used by SP to document the things that we are going to be doing and the dialogue we are going to be having with DPR on how to better manage our activities.
Okay, sir. Now, this question is to DPR. Says the other speakers are speaking from the technical view, while the DPR speaker is speaking from an administrative view. How do they converge? Does DPR have a team of experts in oil completions and productions to relate technically as well as administratively to the producing and servicing companies to get the best way forward to handle commingling in Nigeria, based on the current economic conditions and the cost of production compared to the price of crude? DPR, please. The question is what we call a pothole question. All right. This one, interestingly, Zinne, is for you. Seems to be the only one I have, so I'll just take a go at it. How can you tackle the issue of cross-flow, which is against the regulation in commingling wells?
It says, how can we tackle the issue of cross-flow, which is against the regulation in commingling wells? So when I spoke about my presentation, I said there are 2 aspects to having a smart well. One is measure, one is control. Now, if you don't have any control downhole, then you're going to have cross-flow. So according to DPR requirements, we need to be able to allocate. Right? In some countries, you are allowed to only be able to measure, meaning that, for example, your geochemical fingerprinting, which is, the technology has really evolved to be able to determine where oil and water is coming from. It will tell you which zone is producing what, based on the samples at surface and the correlation backhole, downhole. However, it's not going to allow you to stop cross-flow. So to be able to do that, you need to have some kind of choke downhole. You need to have flow control valve. And by doing that, you can actually ensure that you don't have your cross-flow between zones. Now, when you even measure your pressures, remember, you have downhole pressure measurements, you have downhole gauge. when a zone starts to get depleted, you see your reservoir pressure dropping. Even without doing anything on nodal analysis, you can tell that you're going to have cross-flow. So at that point in time, you can choke that zone back, you can isolate it. So that's why I said that optimizing production from your well is not just about putting the smart well technology down in the ground. You have to actually actively manage it to ensure that you don't have cross-flow downhole and you can allocate production. Thank you very much.
The DPR has made a special request to intervene. I think they are good good regulator. I was trying to save them from this. And now they want to. Okay, please.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. While the Slombije Ezene was making her presentation, she said she wants to know how DPRO, what DPR will look for in granting approval to ensuring that proper allocation of what is produced is being done. From all the presenters, we discovered that some presented on geochemical fingerprinting. That is one way. You take the geochemical fingerprinting of the hydrocarbon signature before you commence production from the various reservoirs. And then when you combine, you also do that. Then the second one is that we also use downhole rate. So in all of this, the third is that we also use ICVs. But in all of this, we must ensure that at least three of them, the result from three of them will matches. We are also looking at the pressure difference from the various zones, the downhole flow rates, the geochemical fingerprints, at least any of the three, and then your nodal analysis. Three of all this must match. Thank you.
Well, I think that the DPI is up there. Thank you. Do I have two? Okay. Now we've come to the end of our presentations and questions and answers. And now our reporters will now have to give a summary. And my suggestion will be that you will take your time to prepare the report, which you will send to Mrs. Caroline Onita, the chairman. But you give us very briefly now, quickly, point by point, key things that you have noted on which you are going to do the report. So there are three of you. You must agree on which person can give us the report, and you have 10 minutes to do that. Thank you.
Okay. Quickly, as a summary of all the lecturers, first, we heard about smart well technology from Chevron, and we know that smart well is both applicable to large and small field, actually, and it is of immense economic value. And it is a way of commingling production from multiple reservoirs. It allows metering and also allows zonal isolation. The main reason why we do it is to reduce capex and for economics. And then we listened to the representative from Lighthouse on fingerprinting, and he talked about the fact that two reservoirs don't have the same fingerprint. All reservoirs have their own specific fingerprints, just like human beings. With fingerprinting, crude oil from each operator can be identified, and in case of disputes, the rightful owners can actually be identified. Fingerprinting is quite an important tool in hydrocarbon accounting as well, and also for crude handling agreements. Shell representative talked about surface commingling and downhole commingling, and the fact that we are currently actually doing surface commingling without much challenges from the regulators, and that the key challenges of downhole commingling by the regulator is as related to reservoir management and allocation. Mr. Ofi talked about oil producers as also compared to the marginal producers, that oil producers only have a level of control on production and cost, but price is out of our control. Hence, our focus is actually to reduce cost and increase our production. We can employ nodal analysis and smart well to reduce this cost. There is already reliable technology in the market that can actually satisfy the DPR requirement to do this commingling in our fields. And Mr. Ladan took the stage of DPR, and he talked about the issues the regulation team has on commingling of the reservoirs. DPR has actually been allowing commingling in some reservoirs in Nigeria, but it is on case-by-case basis. Commingling may also improve the overall life cycle economics, and learning from international best practices, DPR is also considering the practice of approving on a field-by-field basis as part of the FDP to approve commingling on field-by-field basis. So that once it is approved, all you need to do on well-by-well basis is notification of the smart well approvers. The regulator agreed that downhole commingling has potential to add value and will continue to evaluate the request for commingling on a case-by-case basis. On Halliburton talked about the successes we've been having on smart wells. And that smart wells has actually been on since 1999, that is 20 years. However, it is not all reservoirs that are good for commingling, and hence there is a requirement to do a good screening exercise to confirm that smart commingling is the best on a reservoir by reservoir basis. A major key to success is to carry along all stakeholders, including the regulators, the JV partners, in the deployment of smart multi-zone wells and in the testing of the same wells after completion. Madam Ezine then came up to talk about smart wells as well, and she actually specifically talked that smart well is not just a means, is not the end in itself, but a means to the end. There is a lot of engineering analysis that is required in doing the nodal analysis for effective production allocation after well completion. So the tool itself that you deploy downhole is not doing the work alone, but you still need a lot of software and nodal analysis to have accurate allocation. Mr. Chidi Amodo talked about crude handling agreement and the issues and the tensions we've been having between the majors and the marginal field operators who are the injectors and with the pipeline and terminal operators. It will appear as if the pipeline operators are not doing enough to curtail the losses which are being solely bared by the marginal operators who are the injectors. There is need for DPR to play a more assertive role in the realm of the crude handling agreement. Only DPR can bridge this gap. Question and answer. Most of the questions revolved around how to prevent cross-flow and do a proper zonal allocation, which were all explained by the various people that answered. There was a question about data acquisition, transmission, and the storage server, which Madam Ezine answered correctly and explained that a complete loop of data acquisition, storage, and smart are required for smart world to have a good data loop for each smart world that is completed. I think any addition? We still have 2 minutes.
Well, I think you will agree with me that when I requested George Carlo to find the brightest and the smartest engineers who can capture the essence of this, that he has done a great job. Because the presentation now shows that they did capture all the essence of the job and saved me from the trouble of wondering how to report all these. No, that was the trick I played because, yes, see, you know, and they have done it very well. And we suggested that you will now do the write-up, which will be sent to the chairman, and the answers to the questions will also send to the chairman so that SP can use it in the compendium they will prepare, the outcome of this conference. SP section here is the leading SPE section in the world on information and documentation. You will need to see the latest newsletter published by SPE. That way, I want also all the outcome of our meetings and discussions to be available to people. I think it's broken up.
No, it's fine.
It's fine?
Yes.
Okay. So with that, I think I have nothing more to do than to thank all of you for the best audience in a meeting that I have seen. Very well behaved with all the good questions. And also to thank SPE for continuing improvement in all our activities and records. And I do hope that what is left after this is how we use the outcome of our conferences where all the answers have been profiled for the problems, and then use it in engaging our government for better management of our industry. Thank you.
Please, a big round of applause to our moderator. Just one moment, sir. Just if you can just sit down just for another 1 minute. Caroline needs to say a few words, and Caroline, please, very quickly before we go.
Thank you very much. Permit me to stand on existing protocol. I want to appreciate our sponsors for sponsoring this great event. I want to use this opportunity to appreciate ADAS. They actually initiated this discussion. And we want to use this opportunity to encourage others. If you have some interesting topical issues, please do forward it to us. We'll take it on board. And we also want to appeal for sponsors to please support us, because we want to create this forum for us to be talking about things that really impact the industry so that we can move the industry forward. I want to appreciate all the resource persons. What you're seeing delivered today took months of preparation from last year. So they've been talking back and front and trying to make sure that they give a good job today, and we can attest that they did a very good job. I want to especially appreciate ZPRO for giving credence to this workshop. You will agree with me that their presence here has made a difference. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the stay in the conference. Thank you.
Please, Carol, go up and join them. Lady and gentlemen, and my distinguished moderator, please rise now for a group photograph, and after which you can... Well, that is it. We've come to the end of it. We'll have the Oil Industry Night here tonight. It's a ticketed event. If you don't have the ticket, it's very simple. Get to the secretariat, give them 3,000 naira, they will give you one ticket. Or come to the entrance here this evening, give them 3,000 naira, they give you a ticket, and you can come into the Oil Industry Night. Richmond is my name, Timiluluwa is his. See you in the evening for the oil industry night. And of course, tomorrow is the panel session 1 at 9:30 in the morning. 9:30 in the morning. For this evening, see you at 6:30 for the oil industry night. Is ticketed, same venue, yeah. The oil industry night is same venue. It's ticketed 3,000 naira. If you don't have a ticket and you're coming, I'll see you later. Thank you. Please, committee members.